let's add some default records to the Mage2TV brand example table. And we can do that with a data patch. Data patches are PHP classes that contain the logic to modify the table data. These data patch classes are executed exactly once. When a data patch is executed, its class name is recorded in the database in a table called patch list. So this is a list of all executed patch classes in the core modules. If we ever want to rerun a data patch, for example during development, we first have to remove the record for that patch from the patch list table. So now, all data patch classes reside in a module in a directory setup patch data. The class can have an arbitrary base name, but it has to implement the interface Magento setup model patch data patch interface. So let's create our class with the name create default brands. Implements data patch interface. We have to implement 3 methods to fulfill the interface contract: get dependencies, get aliases, and most importantly, apply. Let's first build the apply method. This method does the actual work, so in our case it will create the brand example records. And since we haven't got a brand example ORM model, we will simply use MySQL inserts. Let's first build an array of example brands. Alright, and now let's merge in the generic fields isEnabled and website ID. They'll be the same for all of these records, so I want to do that separately. Okay, now we need a database connection so we can insert the records into the table. To get the database connection, we should inject a module data setup instance. So I want to add a constructor. Okay, that's Magento Framework Setup Module Data Setup Interface. And now we can call insert multiple on the connection. And finally, we should return this to fulfill the interface contract. The PHP doc comment here that was inherited from the patch interface is a little confusing, at least for me, because it talks about reverting the patch. The revert method is actually not part of the patch interface. We will talk more about revertible patches in a dedicated video. For now, all that is important to know and to keep in mind is that the apply method is called within a database transaction. And should apply throw an exception, the transaction will be rolled back automatically. To change this behavior, we could implement the non-transactionable interface. Right here, so that's also just a marker interface. In this case, we would have to take care of handling exceptions in the apply method ourselves. For data patches, this would be very unusual though, and because the patch would be marked as applied anyway, it could lead to inconsistencies if we aren't very careful. So using the non-transactionable interface makes more sense for schema patches, which will be covered in a later video. Now let's move on to implement the getDependencies and getAliases methods in the next videos.